It was another rough one for the Carolina Panthers as they fall 36-10 on the road in Chicago. And considering the amount of injuries and how the defense is played, is this season heading back down the path it was before they inserted Andy Dalton? We'll talk about it here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, as I am live right now and live following every Carolina Panthers game at any time there's any big breaking news. And hopefully, after the amount of injuries the Panthers suffered today, we will not have yet another Monday with a season-ending injury announcement. So hopefully that's not the case. So fingers crossed either way. Follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're on Wednesdays throughout the entirety of the regular season. I'm right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me to get those questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find a qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. The Chicago Bears 36, the Carolina Panthers 10, as the Panthers come crashing back down to earth after the good vibes of the last 2 weeks, where on the road in Las Vegas, we're feeling good. 36-22. Andy Dalton goes out there, throws 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Panthers finally have a functional offense. The defense looked way better than it did the first 2 weeks against the Saints and the Chargers. Then last week, even in a 34-24 loss, all right, defense didn't play well, but it's Joe Burrow, it's Jamar Chase, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to do that to a lot of teams. They did it to another team today in the Baltimore Ravens. So you're not that upset about it because the offense, again, looked functional and the Panthers looked like a competitive team. But today, they went right back down to square one as they were just inept offensively, and then defensively, it's what we saw week 1 in New Orleans, week 2 at home against the Chargers, last week against the Bengals. It happened again today against the Bears offense that, quite frankly, as we talked about at the end of last week, was not a good offense at all. They scored 27 points in the first half. The Bears total scored 24 points, 13 points, 16 points, and 24 points in the 4 weeks before this game, where they scored 27 in the first half. And then in the second half, the Panthers sure played better defensively, but it's not like the Bears really tried to score that often. And they also shot themselves in the foot a lot of times, which is penalties in that second half. The Panthers off defense so far has allowed 165 points through 5 games. That's the most in franchise history. And I'm sitting here just wondering, can it get better? As great as the addition and really the insertion of Andy Dalton was for the Carolina Panthers' energy and for the offense, I told you at the time that it probably wouldn't matter because the defense isn't good, and we're seeing the defense is not good. Even prior to putting Andy Dalton in, when people were clamoring for Andy Dalton so you could have a functional offense, at least have a chance, still felt like, would it matter? Because the defense isn't good. And then when you see a day like today where the offense didn't show up, your defense has no chance even against an offense that hadn't done anything prior. But even last week when the offense is functional, I think plays well, not well enough, of course, to win that game, as they had some missed opportunities on an opening drive and later on as well with some drops, but still a functional offense. Defensively, they didn't give you a shot. And today we saw that the defense did not give the Panthers a shot in a game that they led 7-0 on the back of Chuba Hubbard, who was just 3 yards shy of having 3 straight 100-yard rushing games. I just don't know what else to say at this point in time. There's not a good off defense here in Carolina. This is a bad defense, and it only feels like it's going to get worse. We have already seen that Shaq Thompson is out for the rest of the season after tearing his Achilles last week at home against the Bengals. Derrick Brown played 1 game. He's out for the rest of the season with the meniscus tear. Josie Jewell missed today with a groin and hamstring injury. Not sure when he's going to return. He's not on IR, so at least that's a good sign that he could be back maybe next week, or they're not expecting him to be out for 4 weeks, which would be required had he gone on IR. We'll see whether he can return next week against the Falcons. They'll need him, even though you look at Trevor Wallace, he had his moments where he was able to get up some blocks. The guy had 15 tackles and 10 of them were solo. And that's in his first career start in the NFL. The next highest tackle total on the Panthers defense was Xavier Woods. And I'm wondering today what Xavier Woods is going to say when he speaks to the media, if he does speak to the media at all. Because I do remember a couple of weeks ago in that win against the Raiders, he walked off the field and was shouting at the media about just the criticisms that people had of the defense the first 2 weeks. And they only gave up 47 points in 9 straight scoring drives week 1. So I can't imagine anyone would ever criticize the Panthers defense for playing poorly in that game. Then they get ran all over week 2 by the Chargers led by Jim Harbaugh. So can't imagine why anyone would criticize the Panthers defense. But they go out there against a bad Raiders offense, have success, feel good about themselves, and everybody felt good about themselves. And he's yelling at the media for daring to criticize the worst defense in the NFL. What we saw in Las Vegas was a mirage. We now have 4 data points that tell us this is a terrible defense, and it's probably not going to get better because Shaq Thompson's out for the rest of the year. Derrick Brown's out for the rest of the year. Josie Jewell may be out another week. We'll find out. Jadeveon Clowney, he injured his shoulder in this game, and it's not like he's been that much of an impact player anyways, but still, you can't lose him. And at a certain point in time when DJ Johnson went out of this game, the Carolina Panthers edge rushers were Charles Harris, Teron Jackson, and Thomas Nkoun. Who? I know who Charles Harris is because he's been around the league for a little bit, but Teron Jackson and Thomas Nkoun, all due respect to them and their families because they've worked their tails off to get to this spot. But when that's the trio of edge rushers, you're in a bad spot, even when you already were in a bad spot with DJ Johnson, Jadeveon Clowney, and guys who can't get pressure. Caleb Williams sat back there for hours today and just ran around and looked like he did the last 2 years at USC when he won the Heisman Trophy 2 years ago, and then last year when he still was the team as they had a terrible defense there in Southern Cal. That's what we saw today. We saw vintage Caleb Williams running around all over the Panthers defense that couldn't tackle him, couldn't get him sacked, and just could not make the kind of plays that an NFL defense has to make in order to give their team a chance to win. And again, Dane Jackson, he has a hamstring. He's on IR now. He's designated to return, but he's already missed the first 5 games. And that's somebody the Panthers brought in to be a starter at corner. Mike Jackson has actually played admirably for the Panthers for the first 5 weeks of the season, but that's still a spot where there's questions. And J.C. Horn, his emotions get the best of him. And I get it. You're getting your ass kicked. You gave him another touchdown. It's another week of the same old of your defense not being able to get off the field, being able to get pressure, being able to stop the run, anything positive. This defense just cannot do unless, I guess, they're playing the Las Vegas Raiders. So you don't love to see that, but it happens. He gets ejected. Dave Canales just says we got to handle our emotions. I just wonder, is this what we're going to start seeing from other guys? You know, Deontay Johnson, somebody who has been a ticking time bomb in the past in Pittsburgh when things weren't going his way as far as getting the football. And today was only targeted a couple times, was not able to make anything happen. And I know he's been banged up with the groin and the ankle, so I wonder if that played a factor. We'll talk about the offense a little bit here in a moment, but that's not positive to see Jason Horn, your most talented defender, go out in a game that was already over. But it's one of those situations where, why are you going to fight him now? And Jonathan Vilma was talking about on the broadcast, and man, that's a rough listen, y'all. Like, how many times did he get people's names wrong in this game? Like, God love him. Good player. Just, he's not that great at this. But, I mean, he's getting the opportunity. I'm not. So power to him, I suppose. But he was talking about, why are you going to fight? You had plenty of time to make something happen. And I'm not saying that JC played bad, but the rest of that team, like DJ Johnson coming over there and pushing that tackle at the end of the play, and he's defending his teammate, but it's so weak. This is a guy that provides absolutely nothing on a down out and down in basis for the Panthers defense, and he's out here trying to get into a scuffle when they give up another touchdown. That's just kind of the JV stuff we see from this defense every single week. Jordan Fuller's on IR with the hamstring. He'll come back in a couple weeks' time. We'll see what that does. DJ Woodham, he's still recovering from the quad tear from last year, the partial quad tear, and he's on PUP. And I don't know. Dave Canales not giving us any straight answers other than that he's close to returning and some last hurdles. And we'll see when he returns what he's going to give, as this is a team that has not seen him practice, and you only have to have certain expectations for somebody like that. And they brought in Marquise Haynes off the street on the practice squad for a reason. And we saw that reason again today. And Amari Barno, don't know what he's going to provide, but he's also on PUP. So we're talking about your best defensive player, Derrick Brown, who's out for the rest of the season, your team captain, the other one, and Shaq Thompson, who's out for the rest of the season. Another veteran linebacker who was out today, but looks like the backup, that rook, Trevin Wallace, some of the Panthers couldn't be able to rely on, even though a couple of moments where it weren't great, but first career start, 15 tackles. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to nitpick him at all. Dane Jackson, nice to get him back. It's hard to look at this defense and the amount of injuries that are stacking up and just what they've put out there on tape for the first 5 games and expect different results moving forward. I just don't know how they're going to fix it. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of criticism of Jero Vero, the DC here in Carolina. Ashawn Robinson, that's a guy who played in the scheme, who we brought over. Josie Jewell, same case. Nick Scott, also one of those guys. Jordan Fuller, plenty of dudes who had been in a scheme who were comfortable in a scheme. And there was talk about how in the offseason during training camp, I remember I was sitting there at that press conference, and he said to us how he really was impressed by how quickly those guys had come together and how there really didn't feel like there was that much of a learning process as some of these guys have been in this defense. And then we see how his defense has performed, giving up 165 points the most through 5 games in the 30 season history of the Carolina Panthers. Like, that is a terrible effort they're putting out there. And really, defense is about effort and understanding. And we're not seeing the effort. We're clearly not seeing the understanding, as there was communication issues. I mean, JC Horn giving up that touchdown to DJ Moore in that game. You also see them having 12 guys out on the field, which, I mean, how's that happen? Troy Hill doesn't know what coverage they're in. Cole Kmet's wide open down the sideline. Just things that just cannot happen to an NFL defense. They happen, of course, but you're just not even communicating. You're not lined up correctly, and you can't tackle. Just not a good scene. And my hope is it can get better, but just the reality of the situation, the injuries, and what we've seen, it's hard to feel like it's going to. And where does that leave you now if you're the Carolina Panthers heading next week at home to face the Falcons? And Kirk Cousins just threw for 509 yards on the Bucs ass on Thursday night. So we'll find out. But this defense is it ain't good, y'all. It ain't good, and I'm not quite sure it's going to get any better. Now, the offense, we thought it was getting better, and I still don't think the offense is completely crashed back down to earth and is now back to being the same unit it was when we saw Bryce Young out there as starting quarterback. And no, we did see Bryce Young again today. Does that mean that maybe we'll see Bryce Young later on as a starter? Not so sure about that. We'll talk about the Panthers offense and how things went for them here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a quality candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched on a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something that scares you? Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockdown today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdown. The Carolina Panthers fall on the road 36-10 against the Chicago Bears, which is truly a shocking result considering what we had seen from the Panthers the last 2 weeks, especially offensively, where Andy Dalton was finally able to get that to be a functional unit and to really have them playing the kind of football that we thought they were capable of playing through the first 4 weeks of the season. Looking at PFF, the Panthers had the number 2 pass blocking offense in the NFL. That was a massive issue last year, and really for the last 4 or 5 years, the offensive line has been an issue here in Carolina. That no longer appears to be an issue, especially with Andy Dalton out there at quarterback. Chuba Hubbard rushed for 97 yards today, but had 100 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. The first time in his career, he had a back-to-back 100-yard rushing games, and he had a nice 38-yard run to open up the scoring in this game earlier today, and he's been playing well. So you had a running back who you could rely on, an offensive line that was opening up holes and protecting the quarterback, a receiver in Deontay Johnson who's been dynamic. We saw the last 2 weeks of Andy Dalton out there. Today, not so much, as he only had 2 receptions for 6 yards, and that's not exactly what you want to see at all from Deontay Johnson, but the offense was a lot better. And just today, I kind of look at the offense that we had seen in the first couple of weeks when Bryce Young was a starting quarterback. And I'm not sitting here saying now that Andy Dalton's the wrong choice of the Panthers, that they need to bench him, because I don't think that's the case at all. I just think this was a bad game. And I mean, I said 2 weeks ago, not to sit here and be like, oh, I was right about this, but we knew eventually Andy Dalton's going to have a bad game. The Panthers offense was going to have a bad game, and they did today. He's not going to have 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns every week. We knew that from the beginning. And then even last week, I thought he played well. So after one bad game, I'm not going to sit here and say that Andy Dalton isn't the answer of the quarterback position right now and that the Panthers need to bench him. That's not the case at all. Just didn't have a great game, and it is what it is. But it's certainly disappointing because you do have to now wonder how good the Panthers offense truly is when you consider the opponent. Like the Raiders, they don't really have a great defense, and the Bengals, we know, don't have a good defense. The Bears, though, they got a quality secondary. They were number 2, according to EPA, when it came to pass defense. And that was one area I was a little interested to see how that would work out, where, yes, Deontay Johnson's a good player, but do other defenses respect what Carolina has outside of Deontay Johnson with Adam Thielen on the shelf? Probably not. As impactful as we hope Xavier Legette can be in Carolina, still a rookie. And still a guy that Matt Eberflus, who's a good DC as the head coach of the Bears, is not going to let that guy beat them. And we know Jonathan Mingo has a lot of issues, and we saw that in the second half. They did not stretch the ball down the field at all until that second half. And Kevin Byard has a better beat on where the football is than the wide receiver who knows the route that he's running and knows that he's potentially getting the ball in that situation. And Jonathan Mingo just had no clue where the football was. And that just is another example of how that guy is just not going to help this team win football games. I just don't see it. I hated the pick from the beginning because, the dude did nothing at Ole Miss. He did nothing last year in a situation where he was put in there as a starter when clearly he wasn't ready, and he has a better understanding of things now, and he thinks it slow down for him a little bit, but he still is not a good receiver and not a player that helps you out. Like Jalen Coker, who's a rookie who had not really played, had his first reception today, and that went for 31 yards. 4 receptions, 68 yards, was your leading receiver. He's having a better game as a rookie from FCS Holy Cross than John Domingo is having as a second-year player who is a starter on this offense. That's someone tweet at me being like, why is Mingo in there over Coker? Well, the reason is because he reps with the first team throughout the week, and Coker doesn't. But when you don't have Xavier Legette, who went out with a shoulder injury in the first half, only had 1 interception for 8 yards. But when you don't have Legette and you don't have Thielen, and you have no really choice other than you got to play Mingo, and you got to also play Coker. You got to play David Moore, who had a couple catches in this game. That's just something that just continues to be a concern, just the depth outside of Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. Like Legette, we'll see what the severity of that shoulder is. But just things didn't work out. Like Chuba Hubbard, even the first half, he had 6 carries, 64 yards and touchdown. He ran for 97 yards today. He had 7.5 yards per carry. Like Chuba is not the problem. I think we all understand that. But the Panthers only had 5 first downs compared to Chicago's 16 in that first half. They're over 6 on third down, and that was a problem before they put Andy Dalton in. 139 total yards. Bears had 289 and 7.2 yards per play in that first half. The Bears, before that first down throw to Jalen Coker, had 4 touchdowns compared to the Panthers, 4 first downs. That's just how bad it was for them offensively in the first half. And I mean, overall, things didn't really get that much better. 14 first downs in total today. They were 3 of 12 on third down. He really combined fourth down as well. They were 4 of 15 on third and fourth down in this game. Only 292 yards total. Bears had 424. Just didn't work out. Had a tough day. And we see, too, with this offense of scheme, I'm not going to blame the O-line. Like, there's one of them where one of those sacks, clearly Ike Ekwonu and Damian Lewis were not on the same page, and they allowed a sack there. But aside from that, we have seen week one when Alontae Taylor, not once, not twice, but 3 times ran the same nickel blitz. They could not pick it up. And when Chicago sent some blitzers today, Panthers couldn't pick it up. Dave Canales came out there week one, put his hand up and said, that's on me. We got to do a better job. We got to out-coach, out-scheme that situation. Are you still getting out-coached and out-scheme in that situation again today? Because I feel like this team has not done a great job of blitz pickup. When it's just a standard pass rush, they're fine. But whenever they send maybe 6 guys, they have no idea what to do. And that's a problem. So we'll see how the offense is able to move forward. Now, the injuries offensively are certainly concerning as well. Like Adam Thielen's got the hamstring. He's out for 2 more weeks at minimum. We'll see whether he comes back. Ian Thomas with the calf. He was eligible to return from IR, and we'll see if he plays next week. The Panthers will need him to. As Jatavion Sanders, it's good to see your rookies out there getting an opportunity to play, but he has not played well, y'all, and I think we're all aware of that. PFF, Bryce Young is the lowest graded player for the Panthers, but he's a backup now. Jatavion Sanders has been starting at tight end out of necessity, but also, they dropped him in the 4th round for a reason. He has been their lowest graded player offensively, according to PFF, outside of Bryce Young. And today had a couple of bad drops. One of them was a business decision, and you heard Jonathan Vilma say that, where he saw Edmonds right there, decided I'm not going to catch this ball and get destroyed. And that's the kind of stuff that you can't have. You got to catch the ball, take the hit. You're going to get hit anyways. That's a situation where I get that Ian Thomas is not really bringing that much to the table in terms of being a pass catcher. So far, neither really has Jatavion Sanders in his rookie year. And that's not to say that it's never going to happen and that the Panthers made a bad decision. He just has not been great so far. Like, you watch the games, you see it. The numbers bear it out as well. He's going to take some time. And tight end's a position like quarterback where it does take these guys a number of years sometimes to really develop into being a consistent threat or just an impact player on offense. And I think we're seeing that right now where the rookie is taking some time to figure things out at that spot. And it probably doesn't help that he doesn't have the guys who can the veterans who can mentor him, like Tommy Trimble, who got a concussion today. And God, that was a bad hit to see. It looked like to me initially like it was helmet to helmet. Maybe it was shoulder to helmet. I couldn't really tell. Maybe Brisker gets fined. We'll find out about that like next Friday, where that's the case. I think next Saturday. It take a while to come up with those fines for the week. But that was a rough hit. And good to see Tommy get back up there, but not great. To where Ian Thomas may be back next week, maybe not. But for Tommy Trimble to go out and you're only down to Jatavion Sanders and Felipe Franks at tight end, not ideal for the Panthers in this game on Sunday. But the 2 other injuries that I'm actually probably the most concerned about, Taylor Moton with the elbow, and a stat from Darren Gant, who put this out there, Darren Gant at Panthers.com. Moton had played coming into today 6,758 consecutive snaps. That's insane. He has been out there on the field for every snap at that right tackle spot since 2018 when he took over the starter. He has been the beacon of consistency and the most, not even the most talent, but like their best offensive lineman the last couple of years. And he goes down, and they put in Josh Nijman. Now, the good situation is you have a guy in Josh Nijman who has experience playing tackle in the league. He's had to start due to injuries that were suffered by his teammates up there in Green Bay. It's a much better situation than last year. The Panthers literally didn't have anybody to go to in a situation where Icky was struggling, or if Taylor Moton hadn't gotten injured or Icky got injured, they would have been screwed. This year, much better spot with Josh Nijman. And then the other injury, Austin Corbett goes out with biceps injury. And typically you see when these guys go out, they're listed as questionable. Corbett was listed as doubtful. And we saw last year, Christensen had a biceps injury, was out for the rest of the season. I'm not saying that's what happened to Austin Corbett, but I am concerned when he's immediately listed as doubtful to return. I get time score of the game. Maybe that factored into it. That's not good to hear, because last week, Shaq Thompson clearly tore his Achilles, and they still said he was questionable. The dude is getting carted off, can't even walk to the cart, has a towel over his head, and is sullen. Clearly, he knew he was done for the year, and they were saying he's questionable if a heel. No, he's out for the rest of the year and out permanently, probably here in Carolina. And they came out and said doubtful for Austin Corbett. So my hope is that tomorrow or Mondays have been very newsworthy this year with the announcement that last week Shaq Thompson's done for the year. Before that, we had Bryce Young being benched. Before that, we had We had Derrick Brown being announced out for the rest of the season with meniscus. I don't want to sit here again tomorrow and talk about another Panther player being injured. And like with the defense offensively, if you're down Thielen and Thomas and Trimble and Moton and Corbett, Like, how much can you really expect out of this offense moving forward? Like, they're in a better situation offensive line-wise. Know they have Christensen and Nyman, two guys who have been starters in the league before, whether it was intentionally or as backups having to step up and be starters. You have more experience there, and even Chandler Zavala, who had to step in last week for Damian Lewis. So you're in a better spot on the offensive line than we were before. But the Panthers offense came back down to earth against a good defense, but I think they're a lot better than what they showed today. And the hope is next week against Atlanta, they'll get right back to being competitive and being the unit that we saw the last 2 weeks. But it is disappointing in this game today that they just kind of look like the unit that we saw week 1 and week 2 against what is a pretty solid Bears defense, and a Bears defense that I did not expect to play this well. But as we saw, they did. So the Panthers defense banged up, also just not a great unit. Panthers offense, one bad week. Think they'll bounce back, but the Panthers are 1-4. And they're facing a Falcons team that just keeps finding ways to pull games right out of their ass the last 2 weeks, but threw for 500 yards in that game against Tampa. And then Washington, they look pretty doggone good too. Where is this season headed? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So where is this Panthers season headed after this loss in Chicago 36-10 to a Bears team that really hadn't impressed, especially offensively over the last couple of weeks? Last week, we talked to Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and he said that win against the Rams, a beat-up Rams team, was potentially a turning point for the Bears offense. But I saw this Bears offense week 1 when they played against the Titans, and really, it was a defense that won that game. It was Will Levis in the whoopsie daisies and just some of the dumbest things you're ever going to see from a quarterback in the league, helping them win that football game. Then week 2 against Houston on Sunday Night Football, the Texans are a better team, and Caleb threw a couple of picks. Week 3 against Indianapolis, didn't really look that much better, but then they go last week against the Rams. They get a win against the Rams team. Again, that's banged up. And then today, I thought the Panthers, defensively, didn't think highly of them, and I was concerned about the linebacker stepping in there, but Trevor Wallace thought he played well. Clyde Charles didn't really seem like he did too much for them, but it's good to know that the guy that you at least drafted with the 15 tackles, him being solo, is somebody that you can depend on to be a guy who's going to be around the football and possibly you can build around defensively. But offensively, I just did not expect this to happen. And if the defense is going to play as poorly as he did and as poorly as they have, and offensively, they're going to be susceptible to these kind of performances, even with Andy Dalton in there. Again, Raiders, not a great defensive team. The Bengals, bad defensive team. First time since week 1, but really first time with Andy Dalton in there, they faced a really good defense. And this was the result. Not to say that every time they play a good defense, this is going to be the result. It just was today in this loss. And I still think that with Dalton, the Panthers will be better than they would be with Bryce Young, just based off of what we've seen from Andy starts and what we've seen from Bryce starts, dating back to last year and so far through this season. But defensively and just with the injuries overall, I am concerned. They're sitting at 1-4 right now. Next week against Atlanta at home, I know no Panther fan wants to ever say that the Falcons are going to come out to Charlotte and beat them. But from what I've seen from Atlanta offensively, especially the last 2 weeks, and just those games they somehow found a way to win, I'm concerned about what Kirk Cousins, I know, of all people, what Kirk Cousins is going to do to this Panthers defense next week. And Washington so far, they're looking pretty good too. Well, Jaden Daniels, that rookie quarterback, and they're off to a 4-1 start, and they look like real contenders in the NFC East. I don't know about for the NFC title, but hell, why not, I guess. So those are 2 games. Both are, for whatever reason, not during the 4:00 window. Those are 2 games coming up where, with the way the defense is played, are we sitting here confident that this Panthers team is going to find a way to win both? Probably not. Can they split one of them? Surely. I think they can, because the Commanders don't have a good defense, rather, so Panthers can score on them. I mean, Falcons, you can probably get to them too. I think it's definitely a better defense than the one in Washington. Those are 2 games that, yes, they could potentially win, but the offense isn't basically perfect. Where, look, the game they won, they scored 36 points. If it takes scoring 30 points to win, I mean, what are you going to do? because looking at it, okay, so 165 points. Let me see that they've given up in 3 weeks. Let's do the math there. That's 33. So the defense is giving up 33 points per game. You guys score 30. You guys score what, five touchdowns a game to be able to win at that rate, and how things are going. And that's a high bar to have to clear every single week. I'm starting to get concerned, y'all. And the vibes are great. A couple weeks ago, I mean, we knew that it was probably not going to be that great defensively every single week, but you really hoped that they were going to turn a corner, that the energy that we saw was going to carry over against Cincinnati. And they did make some plays in the second half. They gave the offense a couple opportunities, but just not enough, of course, to help them win that game. And then, I mean, today it wasn't great. They're better in the second half, but offensively they couldn't get anything going. And even still, you gave up 36 points. So what are you going to be able to do offensively to win a game like that? 1-5 feels like it's on the table, of course. 1-6 feels like it's on the table. And we had conversations this week about where the Panthers will trade Deontay Johnson. And I talked to y'all and said that it really depends on what happens on Sunday against Chicago and what happens after that against Atlanta and against Washington, New Orleans, and Denver. Like that, you have to make a decision based off of where your team's at, but also where this whole rebuild is at, whether they want to call it a rebuild, a retool, whatever. There's a lot of areas on this team that need to be addressed. And like, I know people keep asking me about the draft. I ask people always just enjoy the football. And I know it's hard to enjoy the football when it looks like it has 3 weeks so far in the first 5 games of the season, that being week 1 and week 2, and then what it looked like today. But still, you only get so many of these days. And I don't know. My official position at this point in time would be wherever they're at, trade back, because you need assets and you need to be able to find more players and not just take one guy there in the first round or like, run one guy in the top 5. That's where they're at. Like you want to get some assets. Man, it's tough. And I am concerned. I think offensively they're going to bounce back. Defensively, hard to have that kind of optimism based off of what we've seen so far this season. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And thank you to all the folks that were here live with me after the game today. I'm live again every single Sunday following the games. Check me out again live on YouTube next week. But if you ever miss it, it's going to be right there in your YouTube feeds and also wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesday I'll be back to answer your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me right now, and I'll answer them on the Wednesday show. And in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday.